If there is ever a time for leadership and global leadership and national leadership and business leadership and provincial leadership and sector leadership, it really is the time now. So I thought we'll start off with that as a principle, and just to get your perspective on how you see or how you define ethical leadership. And Taryn, I'm gonna kick that over to you to give it a first effort.
Your microphone. To me, I think ethical leadership isn't just something that we find out there, as you see in the sectors and government and businesses. It starts in the home, and it starts in the community. It starts with that small seed of what are you teaching your children, for those of you who choose to have children. I listened very well when you said not everyone's choosing to have children anymore. And I totally understand. I have a 14-year-old who's outright declaring she never wants one, because they're a nuisance apparently. So I'm like, you do realize you're talking about yourself when you say things like that. But it's starting small, and it's starting with that seed that comes from our schools, with the seed that comes from what we're being taught as children, to teenagers, to adults. It's about what we're hearing in the universities. It's about being really worried about this thing we're seeing with academic integrity. It's about taking all those things and going, right, but now I'm in business. I've taken all these things from my past, and now I'm in business. How am I going to lead this business with the best ethics that I possibly can, given my entire education and history of values, of morals, of the ethics I've now studied? Because let's be honest, to get to where we are today, we have studied ethics in some form. It doesn't just happen overnight. We have a code. And other professions have codes. It's not just us. By the way, doctors have codes, engineers have codes. There are other professions out there with codes. And those are the people in leadership. And for me, I think you have to take that and say, now I have to be brave. I have to live this every single day. We always say in our code there's 5 fundamental principles. There's a 6th one that's missing, and that's moral courage. I do believe that we need another fundamental principle called moral courage. And that moral courage is us standing up, as I'm not sure what the man in the audience's name is, but he raised earlier, it's about standing up every day and going, sometimes we have to say no. In fact, quite often we have to say no. And in fact, when people phone me for ethical opinions, the first thing they say is, please don't just say no, please actually research it and tell us why it could maybe be a yes. Normally it's still a no, but it's having that courage to say, no, we're not standing for this anymore.
Yeah, thank you, Taryn. Does that say no also apply to your 14-year-old daughter?
Lots.
Brilliant. Zim, if I could hand over to you.
Is my mic on? Oh. I'm actually, I think my mic is on. Is this working? When I was preparing for the topic, I'm actually writing an article, and the article I'm going to write is Consideration, the Forgotten Pillar of Ethical Leadership. And what I want us to actually reflect on this morning is, normally we say when we talk about ethical leadership is do the right thing considering your actions. And I want this morning to bring consideration back not as a sidekick to ethical leadership, but as a center of ethical leadership. Something that anchors our decisions that we make as ethical leaders, and also something that is a pillar and a critical pillar of ethical leadership. And this simple act of consideration, it is a simple yet profound act of actually putting yourself on the other side of the impact of the decisions that you're going to make. It is actually asking the right questions. Who is going to be impacted by the decisions, and how will those decisions impact them? It is a question of saying that if I had to actually be on the receiving end of my actions, my words, and the decisions that I'm going to make, would I still stay the course? Because what I believe, Milt, is that one of the most important things we can do, and the most radical thing we can do when it comes to exercising our ethical leadership muscle, is to stop, pause, and reflect, and actually ask the right questions before we actually make decisions. Understanding that each and every decision that we make, it goes beyond the boardroom, beyond our homes, and it actually impacts humanity in profound and fundamental ways.
Thank you, Zankita. I love that aspect of the word consideration that you put out there. And I think consideration has almost two legs to it. There is the known and the unknown. So there's the intended consequences, but there's also possibly the unintended consequences. And I think the technical accountant in me, when I think of the word consideration, we think of the standards and we think of the words like judgment and acumens that are written and inherent, and terms like professional skepticism that all sort of curve around that consideration that's required at so many levels. So thank you for giving us that insight and sharing to you. Prof, I'd love your take on leadership from your perspective. Are we winning?
It's working.
Thank you.
So for me, ethics is what you do when no one is watching. Maybe, just maybe, we needed to be where we are today in South Africa, in Africa, but also in the world, because there's no doubt that we are indeed in a spot of bother. To have 3 wars going concurrently, simultaneously, and in parallel shows that something is not right. But I really just want to look at the intersectionality of 3 buckets. So the first is, now that we are in trouble as a people with great natural endowments, so what needs to be done? And then look at what does actually the CEO do? And then lastly, to say, because the world is in a crisis, what do we do in crisis management? And you see the silver thread is actually ethics. Next year will be local government elections, 2029, will be electing the new national leadership. Imagine for a moment if we took a collective decision, but at an individual level, to say, I'll only vote for, support. If I'm a business, I'll only finance only those political parties that at least subscribe to no less than these 6 things. Number 1, I think it's rooting out and defeating state capture, because it's a manifestation of unethical behavior. 2, it's about ensuring that this economy is broadly reflective of the demographics. I mean, 52.5% of the 65 million South Africans don't look like me, it's women, and yet their representation in positions of leadership is less than 24%. African women, less than 4%. The third is ethical leadership. Because it doesn't need definition, it's how we were brought up. It's what your grandmother said, that when you play with other kids, not next to other kids, that when you're going out with friends, the very least you can do, at least pay your portion of the bill. Lastly, that if somebody invites you to lunch or to dinner and they say, I'm paying, please don't order the most expensive item on the menu. Lastly, it's about don't take things that don't belong to you. That's ethics. So we don't need a dictionary or Wikipedia. That's how we were brought up. But we also need good governance, because it's defined in King 5 now, codes of good practice in the Companies Act, but also in common law, because ethical leadership and good governance gives us the handrails and the guardrails to be able to move forward with confidence. The penultimate one is about service delivery, because as a leader you have to love your people in order to lead them. You can't love yourself. Leadership is not self-centered, it's the other-centered, pretty much like falling in love. Because my grandmother says, this thing called love is seeing yourself in another human being. So what does a CEO do in the interest of time? The CEO, number 1, is absolutely obsessed with people. That's number 1. That's why we say people are our greatest assets. Number 2, it's about creating a culture where everybody feels needed and wanted, free to speak their mind without any fear of retribution or reprisals. The third, it's about stakeholder management, because we are part of some sort of an ecosystem. The fourth, it's about reputation management, because if you don't care about your reputation, you might as well just pack up and go. The penultimate one, it's about the numbers. The better you have done the first four, the more the numbers have come. But it's amazing when you meet people, the first thing you say, no, I'm the chairman of the Bidvest Group. We employ 130,000 people, 7 divisions, and we have 112 billion turnover, 14 billion trading profit, because that makes you feel important. The last one is crisis management. And again, in crisis management, number one, we try to remember the people involved. Number two is about telling the truth. 3, the whole truth. Lastly, telling it quickly.